Renee's fingers moved with practiced precision as she prepared the morning cappuccino, the silk scarf at her throat shifting slightly with each movement. It was 10:47 on a Thursday morning, and the Hotel Bellagio lounge was settling into its late morning rhythm, the kind of hushed elegance that catered to executives closing deals over Bellinis and socialites planning charity galas over champagne. The lounge, with its Art Deco fixtures and cream leather seating, hand-painted murals depicting old Hollywood glamour, was leagues beyond anywhere Renee had worked before. She had fought hard to get this position 8 months ago, grateful when the hotel's director had looked past her incomplete paralegal certification and recognized instead her ability to read a room, to anticipate needs before they were spoken, to move through wealthy spaces with the kind of grace that suggested she belonged. She needed this job desperately. The salary was enough to cover her tuition payments for the certification program, and the tips from the Bellagio's exclusive clientele could sometimes cover an entire month's worth of textbooks. With her final semester looming and Derek's campaign expenses eating into their shared accounts, Renee could not afford any mistakes, any reasons for the director to question whether she fit the Bellagio's pristine image. Which was why she had spent an hour that morning layering foundation and concealer over the bruise on her jawbone and the darkening marks on her collarbone. Which was why she had chosen the silk Hermes scarf Derek had given her last Christmas, positioning it carefully to suggest elegance rather than necessity. Which was why she kept her posture perfect and her smile warm but distant, giving no one any reason to look at her too closely, to ask questions she had no acceptable answers for. The elevator chimed softly, and Renee glanced up from the espresso machine. Her breath steadied with effort, the way it always did when he arrived. Dominic Costa. He came in every late morning at precisely 10:50, ordered a double espresso with a twist of lemon, and occupied the private corner booth for exactly 30 minutes while he conducted quiet meetings or reviewed documents on his tablet. He always left 2 crisp $100 bills for a $12 coffee, and he never engaged in small talk beyond a courteous "Good morning, Miss Hayes." Renee knew who he was. Everyone who worked at the Bellagio knew who Dominic Costa was. The hotel director had made it explicitly clear during Renee's orientation that Mr. Costa was to receive flawless service, that his espresso was to be prepared to his exact specifications, that his privacy was to be protected absolutely, and that his guests were never to be questioned or remembered. He was, the director had explained in tones that allowed no misunderstanding, a pillar of the city's commercial infrastructure with interests that extended across multiple industries. What the director had not said, but what everyone understood, was that Dominic Costa's commercial interests included arrangements that were never outlined in public records, that the impeccably dressed man in the bespoke Italian suits was known to control significant portions of the city's shipping and import operations, that city council members sought his counsel before major votes, that business rivals who challenged him too directly had a tendency to quietly sell their assets and relocate to distant markets. Renee had been terrified of him at first, but 8 months of serving him his morning espresso had taught her that he was unfailingly polite, that he never raised his voice even when displeased, and that his dark eyes, though they missed nothing, held a certain measured respect when he thanked her for his service. She had begun to depend on his brief good morning, on the way those $100 bills helped her make tuition payments that Derek insisted were her responsibility alone. Today, Dominic Costa stepped out of the private elevator wearing a navy 3-piece suit that probably cost more than Renee made in a year. His salt and pepper hair was immaculately styled, his presence commanding in a way that made other patrons instinctively lower their voices and avert their eyes. 2 men in dark suits materialized from the stairwell, taking positions near the entrance and the service hallway. His security, Renee had learned. They were always there, silent and watchful, extensions of his authority. If this story touches your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you feel it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. Your support makes all the difference. Dominic Costa crossed the lounge with the kind of measured stride that suggested he had never hurried for anything in his life. He acknowledged no one, his gaze fixed on the corner booth that was always held for him, always empty at 10:50 regardless of how many guests waited in the lobby. René had his espresso ready before he reached his table, the cup and saucer balanced perfectly on the small silver tray, the twist of lemon peel arranged just so on the side. She approached with her professional smile and place, the one that suggested competence and discretion, setting the espresso before him with practiced grace. "Good morning, Mr. Costa. Your espresso, exactly as you prefer. Miss Hayes." His voice was low, cultured, the kind of tone that made people lean in to listen. He did not reach for the cup. Instead, his dark eyes lifted to her face, and René felt the weight of his attention like a physical thing. "Please, sit for a moment." Her smile faltered. In 8 months, he had never asked her to sit. "I should return to the bar, Mr. Costa. The director prefers." "The director will understand." It was not a request. René lowered herself into the chair across from him, her hands folding carefully in her lap, hyper-aware of the scarf at her throat, of the makeup that suddenly felt too heavy on her skin. Dominic studied her with the kind of focus that suggested he was cataloging details, filing away information. "Why is there another bruise, René?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Her breath caught, her carefully constructed composure fracturing. "I don't know what you..." "Here." His hand moved, not touching her, but gesturing to a spot near her hairline where her foundation had apparently failed its purpose. "It's new. Perhaps 2 days old. The one on your jaw is older, maybe a week. Fading from purple to that particular yellow-green that suggests you've been icing it." Terror flooded through her, cold and absolute. He had been watching. Not just watching, cataloging, remembering, tracking the progression of her concealment. "Mr. Costa, I appreciate your concern, but I'm fine. I'm just clumsy, You are many things, Miss Hayes." His voice remained perfectly even, perfectly controlled. "Clumsy is not one of them. I've watched you navigate this lounge during the busiest hours without so much as rattling a teacup. I've seen you manage drunk guests and difficult clients with grace that would make diplomats envious. So please, do not insult either of our intelligence with excuses about clumsiness." René's throat tightened. Her denial died unspoken, and she sat there, exposed, terrified of what this man who missed nothing intended to do with his knowledge. René spent the rest of Thursday avoiding the corner booth, sending the junior barista with Dominic's refills, claiming she needed to inventory the liquor cabinet in the back. The director raised an eyebrow but said nothing. By closing, she had almost convinced herself that the conversation had been a moment of inappropriate concern that would fade into the professional distance they had always maintained. Friday morning shattered that illusion. She was carrying linens through the service hallway, the narrow corridor that connected the lounge to the hotel's main storage areas, when a door she had never seen open suddenly did. Dominic stepped out from what appeared to be a private office, blocking her path with the kind of casual authority that suggested he had been waiting. "We need to finish our conversation, Miss Hayes." René's grip tightened on the linens. The hallway was empty, the thick carpet absorbing sound, the hotel's usual background hum distant and muffled. "Mr. Costa, I really don't think..." "Derek Mitchell." Dominic said the name the way someone might identify a particularly invasive species. Rising star in the City Council's Housing Development Committee. Engaged to a smart, accomplished woman who works at the Bellagio while finishing her paralegal certification. A man who presents very well in public and very differently in private. The linens slipped from her hands. "How do you..." "My network sees everything that happens in this city, René. Every public record, every police report that gets filed and unfiled, every hospital visit that gets coded as accidental injury. I know he destroyed your study materials last month. I know he monitors your schedule. I know he's been escalating. She wanted to deny it, to summon the practiced lies, but standing in this empty hallway with a man whose eyes held no judgment, only cold assessment, the words would not come. Dominic reached into his jacket and extracted a small card, holding it between two fingers. Haven House Legal Aid. They specialize in divorce proceedings and protective orders. They're discreet, effective, and they have connections to safe housing. The woman who runs their legal division is expecting your call. Renee stared at the card but did not take it. I can't just leave. I have tuition payments, my certification exam is in 3 months, Derek has access to all my. I don't offer safety, Renee. I offer the means to end the threat. He pressed the card into her hand, his fingers warm and steady against her trembling ones. What you do with those means is entirely your choice. But understand this, men like Derek Mitchell don't stop escalating. They stop when they're stopped. He stepped past her, leaving her alone in the hallway, the card burning in her palm like a promise or a verdict. Renee tucked the card deep into her purse before entering the apartment she shared with Derek, the 2-bedroom unit in the revitalized downtown district that he always described as our launching pad. The lights were on, which meant he was home early. Her stomach tightened. He was waiting in the living room, still wearing his suit from whatever committee meeting had occupied his afternoon, his tie loosened, a glass of bourbon in his hand. The television was off. That was never good. You're late. His voice was too controlled, the kind of artificial calm that preceded storms. The inventory ran long. The director needed. 47 minutes late, Renee. He set down the glass with exaggerated precision. I called the hotel. They said you left at your usual time. She had stopped at the corner store to buy concealer. Stupid. Careless. The bus was delayed. There was an accident on 5th. Don't lie to me. He crossed the room faster than she expected, his hand closing around her wrist, the same wrist that still carried fading fingerprints from last week. Who were you with? That lawyer from the campaign? That bartender who's always smiling at you? No one. Derek, I was alone. I was just. You think I don't see it? The way you're pulling away, making excuses, staying late at that fucking hotel. His grip tightened, and she felt something in her wrist compress painfully. You're embarrassing me. My colleagues ask about my fiancé, and you're too busy serving coffee to rich assholes to attend my events. I have to work. We agreed I'd finish my certification. I need you focused on my campaign. He released her wrist and moved to the dining table where her textbooks and notes were carefully organized, her laptop open to a practice exam. This paralegal fantasy is distracting you from what matters. From us. From my career. Derek, please, my exam is in 3 months. His arm swept across the table. Her laptop crashed to the floor, the screen splintering. Her textbook scattered, pages tearing. Her carefully organized notes, months of work, fluttered across the hardwood like wounded birds. You want to practice law? His voice dropped to something cold and final. Keep defying me, and you'll get plenty of experience with restraining orders and police reports. Except no one will believe you. I'm Derek Mitchell. You're just the help at a hotel bar. He walked to the bedroom and closed the door, leaving her standing among the ruins of her future, her wrists throbbing, the card in her purse suddenly feeling like the only solid thing in her dissolving world. Sunday afternoon at the Bellagio was usually serene, the lounge populated by guests enjoying lazy brunches and quiet conversation. Renee was preparing a French 75 for a couple celebrating their anniversary when she heard his voice cutting through the elegant murmur. There she is. My devoted fiancée. Every head turned. Derek stood in the entrance, his suit rumpled, his hair disheveled in a way that suggested he had been running his hands through it repeatedly. He had been drinking. She could tell by the way he held himself, that particular looseness that preceded violence. Derek. She set down the cocktail shaker with trembling hands. You shouldn't be here. Shouldn't be here? He laughed, the sound sharp and wrong. I shouldn't check on my fiancée at her place of employment? The place where she spends more time than she does at home, planning our future? The director materialized from his office, his expression horrified. Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to lower your voice. This is a private establishment. Private. Derek's gaze swung to the director, then back to Renee. Is that what you call it? Private meetings with wealthy men? Is that why you won't quit? Why you're always too tired when you come home? That's not. Renee moved from behind the bar, acutely aware of every guest watching, of the director's panic, of her entire carefully maintained professional life crumbling. Please, let's talk outside. He crossed to her in 3 strides, his hand closing around her upper arm with brutal force. Outside? So you can make more excuses? Tell me more lies about buses and inventory? His fingers dug in, and she felt the skin compress, knew there would be marks that no amount of concealer could hide. I know what you are. Playing dress up in your little uniform, serving drinks to men who can afford you. Sir, release her immediately, or I'll call security. The director's voice shook. Call them. Derek's grip tightened, pulling her closer. Call the police. Let's have that conversation. Let's discuss who has credibility in this city. Let's talk about whose career survives when I explain how my fiancée has been creating scenes at her workplace, making accusations. That's enough. The voice came from the corner booth. Dominic Costa stood, setting down his espresso cup with deliberate calm, his dark eyes fixed on Derek's hand around Renee's arm. His 2 security men straightened from their positions, their hands moving inside their jackets. The lounge went absolutely silent. Dominic crossed the lounge with measured steps, his presence drawing every eye away from Derek. He stopped 3 feet from them, close enough that his voice would carry only to those immediately present, far enough to maintain the veneer of civility. Mr. Mitchell. He said the name like he was identifying something distasteful. I believe you're creating a disturbance in a private establishment. Derek's grip on Renee loosened slightly, his political instincts recognizing danger even through the alcohol. This is a private matter between me and my fiancé. Nothing is private when it disrupts commerce. Dominic's tone remained perfectly even. I have significant investments in this hotel. When my morning routine is interrupted, I become interested in the source of the interruption. I don't care about your investments. You should. Dominic glanced at Derek's hand, still wrapped around Renee's arm. Your Housing Development Committee reviews permits for construction projects throughout the city. Interesting how many of those projects require materials from suppliers I have relationships with. Concrete, steel, labor unions. All very interconnected. The threat landed with surgical precision. Derek's face went pale. I'm also friendly with several members of the media who find political scandals endlessly fascinating, Dominic continued. Public altercations, domestic disputes, questions about a rising politician's stability. These stories tend to develop their own momentum. Derek released Renee's arm as if burned. You can't. I don't make threats, Mr. Mitchell. I simply observe patterns and allow natural consequences to unfold. Dominic's gaze was arctic. Now, you're going to leave this establishment quietly. You're going to forget Miss Hayes works here. And you're going to reconsider many of your recent choices. Derek looked between Dominic and Renee, his expression cycling through rage, fear, and calculation. Without another word, he turned and walked toward the exit, his shoulders rigid with impotent fury. Dominic turned to the director, extracting his wallet and placing $500 bills on the nearest table. For the disturbance. And for Miss Hayes's immediate leave of absence, fully paid. Mr. Costa, that's not. It is necessary. Dominic finally looked at Renee, his expression softening fractionally. Miss Hayes, my car is waiting. Marco and Vincent will collect your personal belongings from behind the bar. You have approximately 10 minutes before Mr. Mitchell sobers up enough to make regrettable decisions. Renee's voice came out as a whisper. Where are you taking me? Somewhere he can't find you. Somewhere you can breathe long enough to decide what happens next. He extended his hand. Trust me or don't. But decide now. She looked at his hand, then at the exit where Derek had disappeared, then back at Dominic's steady gaze. She placed her hand in his. The safe house was not what Renee expected. Instead of some dingy apartment or anonymous motel, Dominic's driver delivered her to a renovated brownstone in a quiet, tree-lined neighborhood, the kind of place that suggested old money and deliberate discretion. A woman in her 50s opened the door before Renee could knock. Miss Hayes. I'm Catherine Russo, Mr. Costa's legal counsel. Her handshake was firm, professional. Please, come in. Your belongings should arrive within the hour. The interior was tastefully furnished, comfortable without being ostentatious. Catherine guided her to a sitting room where files and documents were already organized on a mahogany desk. Mr. Costa has arranged for several things, Catherine began, settling into the chair across from Renee. First, your personal items from the apartment you shared with Mr. Mitchell are being retrieved as we speak. Only your possessions, clothing, documents, anything with your name on it. Second, your bank accounts have been secured. Any joint accounts have been frozen pending legal separation proceedings. Renee's head spun. How did he? Mr. Costa has extensive resources and very little patience for inefficiency. Catherine's smile was slight but genuine. Third, and most important, you've been enrolled in the Accelerated Paralegal Certification Program at Monroe College. It begins Monday. Tuition, books, and living expenses are covered through a scholarship fund Mr. Costa administers for professional development. I can't accept. You can and you will. Catherine's tone sharpened. Mr. Costa was explicit. This is not charity. This is an investment in your independence. He will not allow you to rebuild your life on gratitude or obligation. A knock interrupted them. Marco, one of Dominic's security men, entered carrying her 2 suitcases and a banker's box. Everything on the list, Ms. Russo. Mitchell wasn't home. Made it clean. After Marco left, Catherine handed Renee a folder. Inside you'll find the Haven House legal aid information, your new class schedule, and a prepaid phone. The number for this house and my direct line are programmed. Mr. Costa's number is not. Why not? Because he believes you need space to become who you're meant to be without his influence. Catherine's expression softened. He'll maintain his distance until you've completed your certification and established legal independence. His words were specific. She needs to know she rebuilt herself, not that I rebuilt her. Renee opened the folder, seeing her future laid out in neat tabs and organized schedules. For the first time in years, the path forward was clear, terrifying, and entirely hers to walk. 3 months passed like controlled fire, intense, transformative, purifying. Renee threw herself into the accelerated program with the kind of focus that came from having nothing left to lose and everything to prove. She studied civil procedure and contract law in the brownstones' quiet rooms. She practiced legal writing until her arguments were sharp as surgical instruments. She filed her own separation papers, drafted her own protective order, and stood before a judge to articulate exactly why Derek Mitchell posed a credible threat. The judge granted everything she requested. On a crisp autumn afternoon, Renee sat in the brownstones' garden with her certification letter in one hand and her finalized separation documents in the other. She pulled out the prepaid phone Catherine had given her and scrolled to the one number she'd wanted to call for 3 months. He answered on the second ring. "Miss Hayes." "Mr. Costa." Her voice was steadier than she expected. "I wanted to thank you. Not for saving me, for giving me a hand up, not a handout." There was a pause, and she heard something that might have been approval. "You did the work, Renee. I simply removed obstacles." "You removed more than obstacles. You gave me room to breathe. Room to think. Room to become someone I'd forgotten I could be. And now?" His voice carried weight, a question beneath the question. "Now I'm legally separated, professionally certified, and financially independent. I have a job offer from a firm downtown. I have my own life." She took a breath. "Now I'm calling to say thank you, and to ask what comes next." "What do you want to come next?" The question hung between them, honest and difficult. "I want to have dinner with the man who saw me when I was invisible. Who gave me power instead of pity. Who trusted me to save myself." "I have a policy," Dominic said carefully. "I don't involve myself with women who need me. Only with women who choose me. From a position of strength, not gratitude. I'm not grateful, Dominic. I'm interested." She used his first name deliberately. "There's a difference." Another pause, longer this time. "Friday evening. I'll send a car. Wear whatever makes you feel powerful." "I will." She smiled into the phone. "And Dominic?" "I already feel powerful. Friday is about seeing if we're equals." "I'm counting on it, Renee." The line went quiet, and she sat in the garden holding her certification and her freedom, feeling the future open before her like an invitation written in her own hand. The restaurant was the kind of place that didn't advertise, where reservations were made through whispered recommendations and tables were assigned based on who you were, not when you called. Dominic was already seated when Renee arrived, wearing a black dress she'd bought with her first paycheck from the law firm, her natural hair styled in elegant twists, her bruises long faded into memory. He stood as she approached, his eyes taking in every detail, and she saw something in his expression that looked almost like relief. "Renee." "Dominic." She settled into the chair across from him, noting how the restaurant staff maintained careful distance, how other diners averted their eyes. His world, she realized, was defined by the space people gave him. They ordered wine, made small talk about her new position, about cases she was working. But beneath the pleasantries, tension built like a gathering storm. Finally, Dominic set down his glass. "I need to be honest with you about what pursuing this means. I'd expect nothing less. My life is not safe, Renee. The business I manage, the interests I protect, they exist in spaces where law is flexible and consequences are permanent." His voice remained steady, but his eyes searched hers. "I have enemies who would use anyone I care about as leverage. I have obligations that require me to make decisions most people would find unconscionable. If you walk into my world, you walk into danger that never completely disappears. I know who you are, Dominic. Knowing intellectually and living with the reality are different things. He leaned forward slightly. I'm telling you this because I'm in love with you. I have been since I first noticed those bruises and watched you maintain perfect composure while your world was collapsing. But love doesn't make this safe. It makes it more complicated. Renee held his gaze, seeing the man who had given her freedom without demanding gratitude, who had kept his distance so she could find her strength. For 2 years, I lived a lie that looked safe. Picture-perfect engagement, rising political star, the right addresses and the right friends. That safety nearly destroyed me. She reached across the table, placing her hand over his. I choose the danger of your truth over the safety of my old lie. I choose the man who sees me clearly over the man who needed me invisible. I'm not walking into your world blind, Dominic. I'm walking in with my eyes open, as your equal. His hand turned, fingers interlacing with hers. Then we walked together. 2 years later, Renee Costa stood in the study of the estate she now called home, reviewing case files for the Haven House Legal Aid Division she had quietly built from Catherine Rousseau's initial framework. The estate sprawled across 10 acres of carefully secured property, its elegance matched only by its defensive capabilities, cameras hidden in landscaping, security protocols that would impress military installations, staff who were loyal to Dominic in ways that transcended mere employment. She had become fluent in this world of concealed power, learning to read the weight of silences, to understand which meetings Dominic returned from lighter and which left shadows in his eyes. She asked questions only when necessary and offered counsel when invited. In return, he had given her complete autonomy over the legal aid program, never questioning her decisions, never restricting her access to resources. The program had grown beyond her initial vision. 23 women had successfully separated from abusive partners in the past year alone. 15 had completed professional training programs. 7 had custody arrangements that protected their children. All of it funded through untraceable donations, managed through shell corporations that couldn't be connected to the Costa name or Dominic's interests. She heard his footsteps before he entered, a pattern she had learned to recognize even in this massive house. He appeared in the doorway still wearing his suit from whatever business had occupied his afternoon, his expression softening in that particular way reserved only for her. How many this week? He asked, gesturing to the files. 3 intakes, 1 final settlement, 2 ongoing custody negotiations. She closed the folder she'd been reviewing. The new attorney we hired is exceptional. Harvard Law, clerked for a federal judge, wants to do meaningful work. Dominic crossed to her, his hands settling at the small of her back. You've built something remarkable. We built it. She turned into his embrace. Your resources, my expertise. Your protection, my purpose. He kissed her forehead, a gesture of affection and respect. I once told you I don't save people. I offer means to end threats. You did more than that. She looked up at him, seeing the man who had recognized her strength when she had forgotten it existed. You didn't save me from danger, Dominic. You saved me into my power. Outside, the estate's security lights flickered on as evening descended. Inside, Renee Costa stood in her husband's arms, no longer the woman who hid bruises behind silk scarves, but the woman who had transformed survival into sovereignty, pain into purpose, and fear into an empire of quiet, relentless compassion. If this story touched your heart, subscribe to the channel and leave a like. Comment where you're listening from. And if you felt it was really worth it, consider becoming a member to get early access to upcoming stories. And if you felt this story was really worth listening to, click the super thanks button. Your gesture makes all the difference and helps us continue creating stories that touch the soul.